Welcome back to Sika Strength and welcome back to Sika Stand. Today we're doing Ilyin's clean. We're going to do a technical analysis of it. Now in this series we pick two different things, how you can look at those, and then we're going to look at how you can implement them in your own training. Now Ilyin needs no introduction, so I'm not going to waste any time doing that. The first place we're going to start when we look at Ilyin's clean is his speed off the floor and how that relates to your own training and how you need to look at it and see what needs to be changed. Now the snatch and the clean are often kind of educated as being similar lifts, but in reality, when we're practicing those lifts, they're distinctly different. In the snatch, we're going to be looking at definitely a longer barbell pat. We're going to be spending more time in extension. The speed of that first pull is going to feel different to the speed of the first pull in the clean. And there's distinct differences, but in the snatch, we're largely going to be looking at more controlled, more precise movements, speed where we need them to be. But in the clean, what's really important is we're going to be looking at speed from the floor to facilitate what we often hear is known as the two-beat rhythm of the lifts. And this kind of distills down to fast in the first pull and faster in the second pull. So faster in relation to that first pull. So why might we need this, or why do we need to make sure that there's a two-beat rhythm? So across both lifts, what naturally happens at the contact point or the explosive phase is a slowdown of the barbell. The barbell will slow down. This happens for every lifter. If we look at acceleration curves from that German technology, and you've probably seen some of these on social media, everybody's lift slows down as it finishes the second pull, as it enters that contact point, and as it leaves the extension phase or starts the extension phase, the barbell slows down. We can't avoid this. So what we need to do is naturally facilitate speed coming in and speed coming out. Now in the snatch, the barbell pat is much longer than the barbell pat in the clean. The barbell pat in the clean is shorter, of course, because it's to the shoulders, but also in the snatch, the weights are lighter relative to the clean, and in general, much lighter relative to your strength capacity. So when we're snatching, we've got a little bit more time to control that barbell. We've got more opportunities to hit finer positions before we hit that precise acceleration phase. In the clean, however, it's often referred to as the strength lift, and which it is because it's much closer to your absolute strength limits, your high force movements, your max pull, your max back squat. So when we're moving the clean, not only are the weights heavier, not only are they harder to control because they're heavier, we've also got this much shorter barbell pat. We want it to be shorter because if we're wasting kilos on the barbell if we're over pulling the clean. So when we're focusing on that two-beat rhythm in the snatch, it's quite different. It's going to be more controlled off the floor. It's going to be a little bit smoother. However, when we're looking at the clean, what we're looking at is generally faster off the floor, much faster than we pulling off the floor compared to the snatch. Now we need this because we talked about as we have that natural slowdown of the barbell pat as it comes into the acceleration. We need these heavier weights to be moving quickly. However, a barbell pat is shorter. The weights are heavier. And as a result of the weights being heavier, they're going to be more inclined to slow down more. So we need to facilitate this natural slowdown point. We need to overcome it. And we facilitate it by moving that barbell faster off the floor, faster compared to the snatch. And then we're going to hit it even faster compared to that first pull in the second pull. So when you look at Ilya's clean, we'll see him moving that barbell nice and aggressively. Now I know some of you might be thinking of some current lifters like Ratmat, for example, who has quite unique technique, and while that is great for him, for the rest of us that's just not going to work. For the rest of us mere mortals, and even Ilya, who clearly is not a mortal in weightlifting, we need to be looking at moving that barbell really aggressively in the first pull, not so aggressively that the barbell slows down during the second pull. And why is that? Well, we're not machines. That's the large crux of the situation. So you might be able to hit your max velocity or your max speed in the first pull, but you certainly won't be able to sustain it as you move through that first pull, as you pass the knees, as you move through that second pull. You won't be able to maintain max speed. It's just not possible. It's just the nature of humans. Your maximal muscular recruitment, your CNS drive, if you hit max speed halfway up your shin, you just won't be able to sustain that, no matter how strong and how freaky you are. So what you need to do is facilitate a speed that is fast enough from the floor, that's definitely faster than the snatch. It's a quicker barbell, but not so fast that you can't go faster still in that second pull to overcome that natural slowdown point. So we'll see Ilya pulling the barbell really aggressively off the floor, but you'll also see him, and distinctly see him, moving that barbell faster during the second pull. As he comes into that second pull, as he comes into the contact point, and as he comes to the pull under, you will distinctly see him moving it even quicker. So that's really important. So let's relay that again. fast from the floor, not maximal speed, and then faster maximal speed as you come into the extension, as you pass through the contact point, as you pass through into your extension. It needs to be accelerating. You need to be forcing yourself, trying to move faster. So when you're feeling this, it's going to be a little bit different to the actual metrics we're going to see, but what you're feeling and what we'll see with Ilya doing here is it's fast off the floor, and then you need to focus on hitting that fast speed during that second pull. Never forget that weightlifting is a speed strength sport. Technique, timing, all incredibly important. Strength, massively important. But speed, and the only way you'll be able to hit faster weights or hit bigger weights or hit these speeds is by intentionally doing them. Remember, we always say when you're walking down the street, you don't randomly start running. So when you need to get faster in weightlifting, deliberately moving faster is very important. Now, the second area you want to look at is actually tied quite nicely to that first and second pull speed. And the second area is you'll notice Ilya doesn't overpull the barbell. So the theory behind not overpulling the barbell is that if we pull the barbell too high, because the clean has a shorter distance to travel to the shoulder, if we're catching the clean near standing in a quarter squat and then riding it down, we're really leaving a lot of kilos on the barbell, or at least we're leaving a lot of kilos on the barbell in theory. The clean's barbell part is shorter, the time to fixation, so when it's on our shoulders, and the time to the catch point are generally a little bit shorter compared to the snatch. So in the clean, we need to be making sure that we're as efficient as possible. Heavier barbells are harder to move, so for overpulling a barbell, it means that you're less likely to be able to overpull these heavier weights. So shorter distance hopefully allows you in theory to lift heavier weights because you're more efficient with the reserves available to you. So the big thing with Ilya, you'll see that there is no barbell crash. You'll see Ilya's heavily focused on pulling under the barbell. You'll see there's no wasted time in a big long extension. You will not see him catching the barbell super high at meaningful weights. Once we start getting past 80%, you'll see that Ilya is quickly moving under the barbell. As we get then to maximal weights, you'll see that he is super fast under the barbell. And you'll see that max height that the barbell reaches and the height he has at when he's catched in the caught in the bottom of that front squat is a very, very short distance. So what we need to be looking at in your own training is, are you overpulling the barbell? And one of the ways we often facilitate this overpulling the barbell is by overextending and making too much contact. So when we look at your own clean and we look at Ilya's clean, I want you to watch the horizontal distance Ilya's hips move when he's in the start position, moving through that first pull, and then when he moves into the second pull and his extension. You'll see that's quite a short distance, and for the most part, it's not as open as Ilya could be. So there's a good reason for this. One, quite simply, if we overextend our hips, what most often happens is that barbell deviates away from us really far. The weights in the clean are hard to control. If we're overextending the barbell and we're pushing our hips too far forward in the horizontal phase, then we're going to be knocking that barbell away from us. We're going to see a longer S part, and a longer barbell pad is harder to control for us. It's generally going to mean that time is going to be harder. So you're either going to catch it higher, or if you get under fast enough, you're going to get a lot of barbell crash. So when you look at Ilya's clean, we'll see that horizontal hip distance is very short. Now there's a second reason we also don't want to be overextending our hips. If we overextend our hips, for them to retreat back from foot extension to this contracted position in the bottom of the clean is a very, very long distance, and it's really inefficient. So this will also mess with your timing as you pull yourself under the clean. So we'll see if you hit that foot extension and you try and retreat back down into the bottom of the squat, this is a pretty inefficient movement. This is a long distance, and no matter how fast you are, it's never going to be as fast as not quite full hip extension. Now, just to note, I'm not necessarily telling you, Owen said, cut my pull short, start extending my hips, my ankles, and my knees. What I want you to do, though, is get used to this concept of enough extension is enough in the clean. So look at your own training. Do you have a lot of barbell loop? Does the barbell crash in you? Is the barbell really slow in that second and third pull after extension? Is that barbell slowing down? Is it the opposite of what happens to Ilya's barbell? Then there's a good chance you're probably overextending your hips. You're probably spending too much time in extension, and you're not focusing on getting under the barbell fast enough. Now, how do we facilitate those? So the first place we want to look at generally in these lifters training, in this video series that we do, is we look at what they do in their training. We see how might it facilitate these strong points that we're looking at in their technique. Now, there's a couple of things with Ilya, but one thing I do want to touch on first is that the Kazakhstan training style is quite Bulgarian in its nature. Now, I've been lucky enough to been to Kazakhstan. I've talked to some Kazakhstan weightlifters some past members, some current members, and I've also read what literature there is available of the Kazakhstan national team's training minutes. And you can get a lot of sense of this from watching their training, and it's largely snatch, clean and jerk, lots of front squat, minimal amounts of back squat, and lots of drugs. So they support their system with, with drugs. So the important thing here is that we can take some information from it, but it's not necessarily the best learning tool for you. The concepts they apply in their technique are important, but how you'd get there is going to be somewhat different. So in Ilya's case, Ilya's front squatting 270 kilos like this. And one of the most important parts of speed from the floor is strength. And we can never forget this. So weightlifting is a speed strength sport. Speed is really important, like we talked about, but let's not forget the strength part of the equation. Now, the Kazakhstan favor front squats a lot because of drugs, but the really important thing for you is you're not going to be able to facilitate big front squats like this in your own training, or if you are, you're a freak of nature, and I love it, and if you have a massive front squat, tag us. But for the most part, we're going to be looking at a combination of pulls, we're going to be looking at a combination of back squatting, and then certainly the right amount of front squatting. Now, the interesting thing here is that for most lifters, and certainly amateur to intermediate lifters, the clean and the back squat are actually more closely linked than the clean and the front squat. The front squat and the split jerk, hugely linked to each other. But your actual ability to clean big weights, what I'm more concerned about is your ability to back squat certain weights. Now, I don't want to give you ratios. I don't want to give you exact numbers to hit for. I don't want you obsessing over that. Really, what I want you to think about is, does it seem like enough? For example, if you're trying to clean and jerk 120 kilos, your best clean and jerk now is 112 kilos, but you're back squatting 140 for a double, and it is hard as fuck, and your legs are slow off the floor, and you're having a hard time getting out of your clean, then you don't need a rocket science to give you exact numbers. You just know, yeah, my legs aren't strong enough. So we just want to look at it in that case and we think, okay, is this enough? Do these seem reasonable? Can I do enough with these numbers, or do I need more? That's what you need to do. You don't need to get too caught up in ratios. They're nice to look at sometimes, but try not to get too concerned about that. Think about you and your situation, what means enough for you, and then see does it apply in that scenario. So the first place we're looking at is strength. Leg strength, massively important. There's multiple different places where leg strength and ability to extend your legs fast is really important. Weightlifting, as we pull off the floor, as we rebend our knees and extend again, and then of course when we stand up out of the clean. Now, the second area you want to be looking at is actually some plyometrics. And from what we've seen from Kazakhstan weightlifters, they actually seem to keep plyometrics in their training throughout their career. And if you look at that literature, they seem to favor depth jumps. Now, the thing is, for weightlifters, most amateur weightlifters, for you guys watching this, intermediate level weightlifters too, is that plyometrics can be nice in the right places, but aren't really going to make a massive difference. They're going to help a little bit if you implement them correctly. But if you are doing too much plyometrics, they actually have a slight negative in the short term because they're going to fatigue you too much for the lifts. So when we're looking at plyometric training in weightlifting for the amateur, it's not massively necessary. You need to facilitate your strength. High force recruitment, your big strength lifts, is probably going to be more important for you than the plyometrics are going to be necessarily, because a lot of that plyometric ability is essentially how fast can I use my strength, how fast can you use your strength off the floor, is going to be trained pretty well by the snatch and the clean. You just practicing those with enough strength will actually facilitate a lot of your ability to be explosive if you're strong enough, if you hit the right positions, and if you are focusing on the right sequence of speed in those lifts. So plyometric training can be useful. Don't go crazy with it, but it can be a nice part of your training if you do it for long enough in the right areas with the right style of plyometric training. When it comes to not overpulling the barbell, from Ilya's training, we don't really have a lot of things that you can use. Ilya is amazing. When Ilya walked into the gym when he was, I think, 6 or 7, the coach said, you were the lifter that I've been waiting for. He said as soon as he saw him, he knew he was the GOAT. So for the rest of us, you probably aren't the GOAT. So when you're looking at your own training, deliberate, intelligent practice is really important. There's a couple of variations that we can use in your training that is very useful for not overpulling the barbell, but there's a couple of different sections that you're working on here. But the first place, when it comes to not overpulling the barbell, is actually focusing on the right positions. And I know that's kind of annoying. There's no variation that I can give you that's going to be as effective as quite literally just going, okay, I'm going to hit the right amount of extension today. I'm going to ingrain this technical practice. I'm going to reinforce this motor pattern as much as possible. Before I even worry about variations in my training, I want to hit that right technique. I need to do this action, And then I want you to repeat this action as much as possible. Then I want you to repeat this action as weights get heavier. And that's one of the best ways of improving weightlifting technique. So focusing on the right amount of extension, focusing on pulling under the barbell fast in the correct timing is the first place we want to start here. Now, the other places we're looking at is no contact cleans. Don't go too heavy with these. These are quite good for not overpulling the barbell and not overextending your hips. Don't go super heavy with these, somewhere like 50%, maybe 60% in your warm-ups can be more than enough. We're just trying to reinforce an idea, reinforce kind of a system of pulling rather than actually needing a certain ratio of no contact clean to your full clean. Hand cleans could be another great area. However, hand cleans can be bastardized more than you could possibly believe. You can end up overpulling the barbell, over contact with the barbell, pulling with your arms too aggressively, making much higher contact than you would otherwise. So hand cleans with perfect technique can be useful for that pull under section. But remember, if you're not able to do them correctly, you're just going to be making your issues worse. So again, we're really coming back to, for this particular point, is diligent, intelligent, deliberate practice. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If there's anybody you'd like me to look at, please do let me know. Ilya had to be done. His clean had to be done. There's loads of lifters, so please do leave it in the comments. If there's a particular lift you'd like me to look at, and we want to talk through it, then I'll be happy to look at that. I've been thinking of some of those. I've been looking at Ilya's 205 block snatch. Might be interesting to talk around the nuances of block snatches and the technique Ilya uses, so that could be quite interesting. So let me know if you'd like something like that, or if there's other lifters you want to see, please do leave them in the comments. So just comment them down, vomit them out, who you'd like me to see do what lift they would, and I'll be more than happy to get to them.